Washington mornings on the Mall. 105.9 FM. And AM 630. WMAL.
Good morning, everybody. It is 7:06 on WMAL, where Washington comes to talk. Brian Wilson and Larry O'Connor in the House today. And we're pleased to be joined by Representative Chris Van Hollen, the Democrat from Maryland, the ranking Democrat on the House Budget Committee, and a guy who's been a good friend of this program. Congressman, how are you today?
I'm fine. Great to be with you guys.
We want to get into budget, but I have to ask you about this developing story that we have. I mean, we've all heard about General Petraeus. Now comes word that General John Allen, the top U.S. commander in Afghanistan, is under investigation for emails that have been sent to this other woman in the thing, Jill Kelly. I mean, it's just getting more sordid and more sordid as we wake up and read the new headlines every morning. Any thoughts?
Well, obviously the reports are troubling. We've got to get to the bottom of the facts because, as you know, there's lots of speculation. So let's sort through what's real and what's not. But obviously, in the case of General Petraeus, we have some of the facts, and it's a very sad story. With respect to General Allen, we'll have to follow the story where it leads.
Do you anticipate, that this will turn into something other than just Republican Darrell Issa asking questions? I mean, will there be a bipartisan appetite to get to the bottom of these stories, no matter where they lead?
Well, I think the answer is yes. There will be a bipartisan appetite to the extent that they have any national security impact. I think we would all agree that these are important stories if they have a national security impact. I don't think we should pursue them just to the extent that there are these personal relationships involved, unless, again, people can show there could be some negative impact on national security. But to the extent that that's the case, they will be and should be pursued.
Now, there is an open question about whether or not this facility in Benghazi was being used to house or detain people. Now, the CIA says we weren't detaining people, but there's been a lot of other independent reporting that suggests that indeed maybe that was the case. Do you know anything about that, and do you have any concerns about that?
I do not know anything about it. I did see the clip, I guess it was of this individual who General Petraeus had the affair with, who's been giving a speech, and she mentioned it. That's the only thing I know. And again, the question there is whether or not she had access to classified information somehow that she shouldn't have gotten, and I'm sure that they will look into that particular question.
But, Congressman, would you agree that if it were discovered that the CIA were detaining suspected terrorists anywhere, let alone in this Benghazi compound, that would be a betrayal of President Obama's promise to close down these operations?
Well, my understanding from another person who I saw speculating on TV was that if it were the case that they were detaining people, that it may well have been the Libyans who were detaining them. It could have been other U.S. government, non-CIA folks, in other words, military folks. So let's just get to the facts before we jump to conclusions. But I agree.
No, we just want to speculate, Congressman.
Yeah,
that's.
But I agree that we should certainly, with respect to Benghazi, we should get the facts. With respect to these other issues, the General Petraeus issue, we should also get the facts to the extent that they have any relevancy to national security.
Representative Chris Van Hollen's our guest, and as the ranking Democrat on the House Budget Committee, you are going to be a very important player in this lame duck session. We're talking fiscal cliff, and we've had some Republican congressmen on, and it seems that when we ask them about it, they focus on the tax cut aspects of it and how the budget is impacted by the tax cuts and how the economy will be impacted. I'd like for you to address that, but also to talk about the cuts in the budget that will be triggered by sequestration and what the impact might be.
Right. You've got a very combustible mix here. I mean, there are big risks as we approach the fiscal cliff. There also could be opportunities since this is an action-forcing event. And you're right, there are two big pieces. One is, of course, the budget cuts, and they're across the board, sort of these meat-axe indiscriminate cuts. And there's agreement that that's not a very smart way to cut the budget. I do think there's a very decent chance that we'll be able to come up with an alternative budget saving, set of budget savings so that we still reduce the deficit over time, but do not do it in this sort of across-the-board indiscriminate way. On the tax piece, look, as you know, that there are these statements that are being made in public The issue is that we've got to take a balanced approach to reducing our long-term deficit. We also need to take care not to do anything to hurt the economy in the short run. You know, the Nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office just came out with a study about a week ago showing that the most important thing we could do if we want to make sure we don't upset the fragile economy is to extend for 1 year the payroll tax cut or its equivalent, that has a much bigger impact on jobs in the economy, than allowing the top rate on wealthier individuals to rise.
Representative Van Hollen, 2 years ago in the lame duck session after the 2010 midterm elections, President Obama, in a bipartisan way, extended the Bush tax cuts. And at the time, he said this was good news for the middle class. He said the last thing you want to do is raise taxes in the middle of a recession. What has changed?
Well, there are a couple of things here. Number one, we've had, as we should, a very important conversation about getting our long-term deficits under control. And everybody has looked at this, from the bipartisan Simpson-Bowles Committee to the bipartisan Rivlin-Domenici Committee, have said you got to take a balanced approach if you want to credibly get there. And so we should begin to do that because if you look at the history and you look at the Clinton era, you know that when we allowed those tax rates to go up, number one, the economy was not hurt. Number two, that was the last time we balanced our budget. So we need to combine cuts, and we did about $1 trillion in cuts last year. We need to do more cuts, but we need to combine them with revenue. And I just want to circle back to the point I made. Mm-hmm. You do this in concert with other measures to help accelerate economic growth, and by far, a one-year extension of the payroll tax gets you a lot more jobs bang for your buck. I mean, it kind of makes sense. What you're doing is giving 160 million working Americans a little more money in their pockets to go out and spend it, rather than just a small slice of the top 2% of the population getting an extra break, which, frankly, they don't go out and run out and spend. So from an economic point of view, it's much more important to do the other one. I don't think Republicans keep saying, look out for the economy. Well, maybe they'll join us then, in at least me, in talking about extending the payroll tax cut for a year, or at least its equivalent. Right. I mean, you can do it through another mechanism.
Let me ask one more question as our time runs down, Congressman Van Hollen. You have a situation where the president won the election, but the Republicans still control the House of Representatives. I hear the Speaker of the House saying that there's room for revenue enhancement. We can grow revenue, but I don't want to raise tax rates. To me, that seems like he's willing to talk some level of compromise. Yet when I hear the White House, I don't hear that same willingness for compromise. Do you see that there is a willingness on the other side of the equation for compromise that could actually lead to something that would be substantial and long-lasting?
I do. I think the tone the Speaker is using is one of compromise. On the substance, let's just wait and see. A lot of people interpreted his words in very different ways the other day with respect to revenue. In other words, it wasn't absolutely clear whether he wasn't just repeating what he and others used to repeat, which is that simply by reducing rates and eliminating some of these tax preferences, that you would generate enough economic activity to cover the costs, and it wouldn't increase the deficit. I mean, we know from earlier periods of history it just doesn't work that way. Hopefully he was saying something different. In terms of the president,
very quickly, Congressman,
I think the president is definitely willing to work on this and compromise. The key is to take that balanced approach toward our long-term deficit reduction and focus on jobs in the near term, especially as we get our economy fully in gear.
Thank you for joining us, Representative Chris Van Hollen. Oh, if Nancy Pelosi steps down as minority leader, are you going to challenge your colleague there in Maryland, Steny Hoyer?
I think I'm expecting. I mean, no one knows, but I think Nancy Pelosi will run again.
Oh, that's not a no.
Have
okay.
Any inside information?
It's going to be an ugly fight between Hoyer and Van Hollen. We're looking forward to that. Thanks for joining us.
Get along well.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Congressman.